Personal Capital free tool. Create income statement using tables. Remove the cap on your capital using Personal Capital free tool. Here we are in our Personal Capital practice file. In prior presentations, we linked to financial institutions so we can pick up some practice data from them. Now we're focusing in on taking that data, creating an income statement from it. Our practice problem here, considering an income statement that's going to be business income statement, carving out what might be needed for, say, a Schedule C for tax preparation purposes, noting that this is not the strong point of Personal Capital. Personal Capital focusing in on personal information, typically balance sheet information, including net worth information, but does have the situation where it does pick up the transactional detail and allows us to categorize it, assigning categories or accounts as well as tags, business and personal in our case, so that we can then sort this into an income statement. We've been comparing and contrasting it to something like a QuickBooks, which does then take similar information, but usually limited to business information, and then categorizes that information. Once categorized, if properly done, then it can make the financial statements for us, basically making then the balance sheet and the income statement. Note that in something like QuickBooks, you have to construct basically a balance sheet and income statement because they're all being connected with the double entry accounting system. Whereas with Personal Capital, the balance sheet is being constructed from the financial institutions independent from the data that we're creating the income statement with, at least on our purposes, right? We're doing our data, and then we're going to carve out the income statement that we need, and we're going to be focusing in on the business data. So first, we went to the overview dropdown to do this, and we went to the transactions information, assigning out the category and the tags here, which we have to do no matter what software we use, whether it be QuickBooks or any other type of software. You have to assign accounts in it some way, shape, or form. Then we went over to the banking cash flow and we exported the data to Excel, first to a CSV file and then Excel. Now we have it in Excel. Once properly categorized, it's pretty easy for us to then convert it to a table, which can then carve out our income statement. So now we're going to go then to our data here. Here we have it in Excel. It's no longer in a CSV file, but now an Excel file. So we might change this like data. This will be the data file. Yeah. Also, just note that as we do this process, we're going to do this kind of the more simplistic way first and just use a table, the more intuitive way, I believe. And then later we'll do a pivot table, which is a little bit more complex, but actually can be easier and faster to use and give more diversity and options for us in its use. Might want to then copy this file over as well before, just so you have a separate file of it. And you can always go back to the primary data file. So I would typically go to this tab, hold down Control, and then left click and drag. That'll typically create another file, or you can right and possibly create a duplicate in that way as well. Now I'm going to do this with a table type of format. And so this is probably the most intuitive way that we can do this, is just basically to group this information by category and then add up the information so that we can just put them into one line item. Our goal is to take the categories relevant to business, put them into one line item so that we can then build that into an income statement. So one way we can do this is what I would typically do, is actually put this into a table. I like to see it in a table so that it's less likely that I'll unhinge, one account column to another, meaning like this 18 should be going to the same column over here and so on and so forth. So it'll be easier for me to do that if I then put a table into it. If you add the table, typically the first line, the headers, you're going to want to select the headers and make them bold so that they will stand out. So I'm going to highlight the headers or select the headers, go to the Home tab, Font Group, and I'll make them bold. Also note that if we have properly categorized and tagged the information, the descriptions and the amounts may not be as useful at this point in time. So you could delete them or possibly simply hide them. To do that, I'm going to put my cursor on B and then drag over to C. I'm going to right click on them and possibly I'll just hide them this time. I'm just going to hide that data because they shouldn't be necessary for us. Then you can see, I can see columns A to D here, meaning there's some hidden columns in between them. So let's go ahead and add our table. You could select the entire table. So if I select the group that I want to put a table around, and then I'm going to go back up top and I'm going to insert and go to the Insert tab. Then we're going to make a tables group and I'm going to group it into a table. So let's make it into a table And then it's got the whole table. I'm going to say, okay, that's the one. And so there we have it. Now we have a basic table with the headers, and that gives us our drop downs that allow us to filter fairly easily with the filtering items. So the first thing the easiest way we can kind of do this is we can first filter by the tags, business versus the non-business, filter those items, and the business is on top here. If I filter it the other way, Z to A, here's all the personal data. Now, I don't need the personal data. I could simply go in and delete the personal data, right? I could select these columns, or rows, I should say. I'm going to go from 2 down to 19 to has all the personal data, and then I'll just delete it. Now, oftentimes I'm hesitant to delete things, but we're just carving out what we need for the business data right now. We'll talk about possibly making a personal income statement in the future. We can then use this to make personal income statement as well. The pivot tables would be easier for us to go back and forth between personal and business, which we'll take a look at in a future presentation. So I'm going to right click and just simply delete all of that information. Now I have all business information, which is nice, and I can simply sort this information by category. Sorting by category, I'm going to go from A to Z. So there we have it. It should line up the proper number with the proper category because I have it in a table, so I'm not too worried about that getting messed up. I'm going to hold down Control and scroll up just a bit so we can see the data a little bit more clearly now. Another way to zoom in is to use your zoom down here. So now I'm going to calculate everything that's basically income. I'm not going to subcategorize between web income and gig work at this time. I'll do that more when we do the pivot table, which can give us a little bit more detail. I'm just going to assume we want this all on line 1 of the Schedule C. So I'm going to go all the way down to everything that's going to be an income item down to here, and we sorted them out with an account number for us. That's why we put the account number in there, because when I sort, then it put all the numbers up top in Excel. If you didn't do that, you'll have to dig around for the income a little bit more, but it shouldn't be too bad because all the positive numbers we would assume would be income, negative numbers, the expenses. I'm going to make this column a little bit shorter, and then we're just going to use our trusty sum function. So I'm going to call this income, and then I'm just going to say this is going to be the sum equals the sum, SUM. We could double click on the sum function down here and just highlight everything up top. So we're just going to highlight up to all the income accounts and so on. This is just practice data at this point. So there we have it. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here. All these are contractors. So now I'm on the expense categories. I'm just going to say contractor. And then I'm just going to do the trusty sum function again. Sum of all the contractor information, which is actually down here, and bring that up to this category. So I'll bring this down so it's at the last line item. And then we've got the general merchandise. I'll say, okay, let's pick that up. And we're going to say this is going to be equal to that. And then we're going to go down to the office supplies down here. So we'll just say office expense, office supplies. I'll put them in the same category, expense and supplies. This is going to be equal to the sum of the office expense and supplies. So we're going to pick those up. And then we've got the rent. So we'll pick up the rent. Remember that if the rent was like a home office, we'd have to then break it out. But it's easiest, I think, to just put it all into one area. And if you have to break it out on a tax return, you're going to have to use some kind of method to do so anyways. So you just have to note that for your tax preparer or yourself, that you'll have to make that adjustment, and you'll have to do it no matter what. Telephone, same thing, or possibly the same thing. Utilities, same thing. If it happens to be a home office, you'll still have to break it out between personal and business. You'd have to do that with the help of the tax software or tax return. I'm going to format these cells now. I'm going to select these cells, maybe these cells, right click, and I'm going to format them. So I'm going to make positive. I'm going to make it currency is the way I like to see it. Negative numbers bracketed, no $sign. I don't really need the pennies. Maybe I'll take off the pennies. Don't really need those. And then save it. So there we have it. And then we can also put a total down here on my table. And I could do that by just going to the table tab up top and say that I would like a total column. We could use the sum function to total it up. But I can say I want a total item here, and then it does the total for us down below. We've got to make sure it's the sum function. That should be basically net income if this was all business activities, because all the positive numbers are income. all the negative numbers are expenses. So let's see if we got that same calculation here. I'm going to sum up this way. And again, these are just kind of made up numbers at, at this point. So I'm going to sum these up. And so there we have it. It came out to be slightly different, so I'm going to go back and see what is different here. If I add this up, this went all the way up, and I can just double check my categories. So that looks right, that looks right, and so that looks right. Okay, I think I got it now. There was a hidden column. So now the two add up, so we sum it up this way. It should add up same way here. And then if we just want to condense this down to a smaller area, we can kind of group these items together. You could hide columns, like I could hide everything in between here and just group this income line item. So in other words, one way I could then break this down is I could hide all this, right click and hide, and then I can basically hide, I don't even need this one, hide that. And then I can hide all this, selecting these items and hide. And then I can select all these and then select, right click and hide. And then I could select these, right click and hide. And then select this item, right click and hide. And then this one, right click and hide. So then we got kind of our income statement right here. Nice quick little, calculation for the income statement. Obviously it doesn't tie out over here anymore because we hid all the cells. That's one way we could do it, or I'd rather see the details. So I'm going to select the whole thing again. I'm going to select the whole thing and unhide, right click, unhide, right click and unhide to get it all back. And I got to select up top here to get that last piece, right click and unhide. So there we have it. And then you could just kind of make another little summary on the side here. So I'll make another one and just say, I'll make this column a little bit wider, and I'll just bring it on down here. I'll say this is going to be income. And then I'm just going to copy it across by using autofill. It kind of pulls over the number. So there was income, and then there was contractor, and I can use autofill down because there was one right below it and to the right. So we got that, and then we got the general miscellaneous, so we got that, and then other. So we can pick up other, and then I'm going to autofill that over here. And then we've got the rent, and then we've got the telephone and utilities, and we can autofill those over. And then I'll just sum this up. This will equals the sum of these items. Maybe pull it down just so it's kind of lined up down here, so we have them all lined up. So now we got this little income statement that we could basically kind of use as our baseline, possibly for something like income taxes. So that's probably the most intuitive way to just take this data and group it together. Just group them by category, and then add up the categories. Now we might want to group this another way. And that way we might be able to utilize the personal data, and then we can sort it by personal data and business data, giving us a little bit more flexibility. And so we'll kind of do that next time, and that'll be with the use of the pivot tables. But this doesn't take too much work to do it this way. I think it's a fairly intuitive way to do it this way, or at least start off with this kind of data, get to your raw data here, and then maybe use the pivot table so that we can kind of double check the data with the pivot table. So we'll do that next time.